Hi. So yeah, we are. With spices, for me also. Spices is so intriguing, and it intrigues me till date. It's mystical, whatever said and done. That's why it says spice is life. Add some spice to your life. That term really applies, and it really makes a difference. Not only in this aroma of spices, or the benefits of spices, or what it does to you when you sit with a bowl of hot chili or a nice piping soup, which is one of the very common soups is tom yum soup, which has the lemongrass and the chili oil, and it does a lot to you, don't you think so? Yeah. For me, growing up, my memories of spices is because spices was so mainstream and so common in our kitchen at home. Coming from a home which was a home of people who were foodie. We talked food all the time. And I think it's mostly like that in most homes in Asia, and particularly India. So you get up and the question is, you hardly even brushed your teeth, what do you want to eat? And after that is, what do you have for lunch? And then it is, what should we make for dinner? So it just goes on. It's all revolves around food, and then to make that food interesting, it was not, I thought it was by birth all Indian, you see. It's all ours. We are the spice people. We know spices. We had it forever and everything. And that's the belief till I was 16, I believe very, profoundly that spices are us. And the world calls it curry, sorry, but, everything like that. And then as I, opened up my palate to different cuisines, which were just making the entry into Bombay. Bombay being the most cosmopolitan city in India. And then there was Chinese, and then there was Italian. Chinese was the big one food which made an entry, followed by Italian, like everywhere else in the world. Okay, what is this spice doing in Chinese cuisine? Or why do I smell cinnamon or nutmeg in Italian? So the questions start coming to you. But aren't these spices ours? And the rest of the world, really, they know how to eat? Kind of a thing. So that's what, as a young teenager, I always thought. And I went on this study at a very early age in the discovery of how spices all came about and everything. Till it hit me once again when I moved out of my home country, when I moved out of India, and I had to leave in Bombay for work, and then later on, as I immigrated to Toronto, I went deep into the study of food, and spices became an integral part of it. And then I come to know that all the spices that we have is not all mine, is not all Indian, and I cannot put any nationality to spices. And that's the beauty of spices. And I always, when I put out my talks and my lectures, and I say, don't label spices, embrace them. Just embrace them. If you think it's shepherd's pie, yes, it's shepherd's pie. It can be good with spices. If it's a muffin, yes, it can be good with an essence of clove. Have you tried it? So that's what. Don't give any nationality to spices, and that's what we are still doing in North America. But fortunately, in Asia and Korean or Far East or up to the Middle East, they have realized, because for them, it's deep in their history. But for Europe and the Newfoundland of Americas, it's not in their history. But it's part of their history. That's the trade route. If I thought there was one spice trade route, in the last 10 years, I am proven wrong. When I read and discover, no, there was not just one spice route. There were many spice routes. So every time you go deep, dwelling into this history of spices, it comes out with more fantasies, more intriguing stories, and more realities, some very harsh, because there was colonization. And there was, wiping out of indigenous people. So all that also happened on these spice routes. So there's some cheer, some despair. So I always say, that everything, and to come to know that I would say that was the earliest time of globalization, at least from the south of Europe, the Mediterranean, to the east of Africa, all of the Middle East, and to all of Southeast Asia. They were very well connected. It was globalization at its peak around that time, and the 11th, 10th century, I think so. It was fantastic over there. To think of that chili is ours, or cloves is theirs, or this and that. And today's world doesn't matter. Today, at this time, we have all the spices at our fingertips. But are we doing much with it? No. And that's what. We should do a lot with spices. Other than just having them for flavor and taste, they also have medicinal benefits. And that's one reason they were so popular in Greece during the Greek Empire. And they were the ones, the first people in Europe to understand and discover and give a kind of a boost to spice trade to reach the European shores were the Greeks. So way before even Christ, it was there. And for the Middle East, which is your south of Arabia, that is Eden, that is Yemen, to trade with the subcontinent. And then the subcontinent, that's India, Pakistan, which is divided now, which was one country, and Burma, also part of it, to trade with the islands of Indonesia was completely happening when everywhere else were dark ages. So it was all happening. So they knew of each other. They knew of the spices. They knew of the trade. And at that time, there was only one thing that they didn't want was each other's territories, thankfully. But they were trading. They were trading whether it was by portage, through lands, by horses, camelbacks, or by small boats, ships, whatever were built at that time. I hear of shipyards in Arabia and thinking it's a desert. So how were shipyards in Arabia? How were they having ships and boats? So definitely, they were importing the best of timber from India long before. I would never give a thought to it. And then recently I gave a thought, yes, of course, definitely. So the Lost Ark would have not been built if they were not already in touch with India, probably. Thinking of that, right? So it was mostly teak, one of the most very reliable piece of wood. This goes on for ages, strong. That was teak. And teak forests are found in Asia, essentially in India and China. So that was the thing. The trade was happening unless we thought that it was not. No, it was. And now history proves it. And everything is going back. Like Columbus left for India, reached 4 times to the Indies, and was trying to convince the king, this is India. This is the other corner of India. I'm telling you, there is no Pacific Ocean. It's all connected by land, and this is the other corner of India. So
that's why indigenous people were called Indians.
Indians, yeah. And he went 4 times. He didn't even reach South America or the mainland, up to the Caribbeans, and saying, this is it. Then they said, okay, prove it. Bring us the spices. He didn't find any. Because that islands didn't have the spices. But yeah.
Specifically why he went was because they wanted access
to spices.
That was the motivation.
Yeah.
The fact that they found gold turned out to be a boon.
Yeah, boon,
They didn't go looking for gold.
No.
They went looking
for spices. And the reason they went looking for spices is because the spice trade at that time always was dependent on the Arabs. Mostly Europe was dependent on the Arabs. Even when Venice and Genoa were spice trading cities in Italy, they were dependent on the Arabs. And with Arabs giving them from long stories around spices and the difficulty and dragons and monsters, and I don't know what not inhabited those islands to price the spices at that value, that they were as pricey as any precious commodity like gold, silver, and pearls. And along with the spices, in time, when they came into the 14th century, other things were also commodities were traded, like silk, fine cotton muslin cloth, porcelain from China, and everything was traded, and everything they came for more. Frankincense. There was a craze for frankincense in the Greek time. And all kind of perfumes and all kind of essences, from essential oils, from fruits, from flowers. So along with the spices, everything else was traded. Everything else was introduced to the different empires. Now, if you go even beyond that, in Egypt also, the spices were available. So if we go to the pyramids, you see the paintings, and you see there also spices, cooking with spices. So that takes us back, I don't know to which time, like before Moses, like spices was. So I think globalization today and yesterday and every time has been our aim to come together, to bring and share each other's things. But what really is wrong with it, even today and then, was not giving the space and letting things be as they are when you discover something, when you find something. We see that even today, that you find something, there's a greed to get it, but you don't want to do it peacefully. Why not? It can be done peacefully. Everything you can share on this planet, it can be done peacefully. So that's the despair I see then and now. Like when I hear of Vasco da Gama and his massacres, my God, it's like you can't even imagine, you know. And I was reading this book. This is a fantastic book. Before coming here, last week I went to the library. I said, let me read what I find. And this author, John Key, has lots of books on spices and the route and the trade routes and the silk route and the trade routes. And he's a fantastic historian. And he has gone on to describe these kind of atrocities that also took place around, you know. Like if you find a Aboriginal community on an island, sometimes they were just wiped out. So it's sad, but the happy part is that yes, it is there, and it is beautiful to have spices. Spices are in our soaps, the essences. Spices are supposed to be the very, you know, secret ingredient, one of the spices in our Vicks Vapor Rub. Secret ingredient in Coca-Cola. So they all are somewhere coming as an essence or a flavor or something from spices. So spices are definitely intriguing and a main part of our lives. In culinary, in medicine, in everything. I'm just going to open it up. If you want to know anything more on spices before I continue, what anything you want to know or you wanted to share about the spice route that you knew was a myth, or you think it is right, or you know some part of history that I'm missing out, I'm open to hear you guys. Anything? Yeah.
How come the spices were perceived as more valuable than food?
I'll tell you. The value of spices, I think, were perceived more valuable than fruit is one of the passage I want to read from here, which is really interesting. And I always have been giving this information to a lot of in my talks. And I found it in this book. So I'm going to read it exactly in the word of as it was recorded in history. So it says, the Arabians say the large birds bring those dry sticks called cinnamon from their nests, which are built with clay on precipitous mountains that no man can scale. To surmount this difficulty, they have invented the following artifice. Having cut up into large pieces the limbs of dead oxen and other beasts of burden, they lay them near the nest and retire to a distance. The birds fly down and carry off the joints to their nests, which are not strong enough to support the weight of the meat, and fall to the ground. Then the men come up and gather the cinnamon. And in this manner, it reaches other countries. So these kind of stories definitely were going to increase the value on the commodity, on the spices. And in the, as early as the 13th and 12th century, when spices from the Mediterranean ports started going northwards into Europe, they were fantastic because through the winter, nothing you could not store your food, your meat through winter, or preserve your food through winter. So all these spices, with their lovely aroma, and they were not necessarily, I think, preservatives, but they acted like one. The mace, nutmeg, clove. So these, even for foul meat, tasted good when rubbed with all these things. So that's why they became, such spice commodities. And mainly the Romans then used them a lot for, especially the frankincense and other kind of raisins like myrrh were used for more like for beauty, to beautify, to make their place beautiful, to show if you are a important person or a rich person. you were going to serve your diners with the best of food laden with spices. So I think a curry was happening way back in the Roman kitchens before I think England popularized it. So it was happening, you know, and that's where, again, the spices became important because they were preserving all through the winter months their meats, their food for them. So therefore, the prices of, yeah. And before pepper, everything was definitely bland. So once you get the flavor, you're going to value it, I guess. That's the thing, yeah.
That's one point too, is that, you know, we take for granted having all these spices, having all these flavors, having this incredible diversity of ingredients all year. That is not the case for most places in most of history, where there'd be a really, really limited
Yes.
selection of ingredients, right? That were only available for the most part in limited times of the year. You know, there were a lot of gruels, a lot of, like, you know, plain breads, a lot of very bland,
Yes.
bland food.
True.
So spices were like, you know, they were pretty potent in the sense that they really transformed and elevated a pretty bland and limited cuisine for the
True.
most part. The Romans in particular became this huge obsession with pepper because they were rare, because they were imported, and because they were expensive. And this wasn't like a highly commodified culture.
Yeah.
They became very much the de facto status symbol.
Yes.
They would have special pots designed
Yes, to hold
the
spice,
peppers,
to hold the
but
peppers.
not in your cupboard, but on the
Table,
and
yes.
on the commode, so that people could see.
See, true.
You had the pepper. You know, it was very conspicuous to have
Very right.
to use spices and to use them in a
Yes,
right way.
yes.
You know, and so yes, and to bring up and elevate a food that
Yeah.
would have otherwise been extremely rich.
True.
There was even one of the sort of commentators or critics of the Roman in the Roman period, you know, went on a long diatribe about how the city of Rome itself was accruing an enormous fiscal deficit because of their obsession with
Importing
peppers.
spice,
They
yes,
were
yes.
actually leading expansionist campaigns into Europe to get booty and wealth to bring to Rome to trade
To,
for
yes,
pepper.
true,
And he's
true.
like, so it was almost like pepper was the engine of Roman expansion and war because they were hungry for this status symbol
And,
that they couldn't get themselves, that they had to get through Chinese and
Yeah,
Arabs.
and in this book, I also read that also was when the Roman Empire was in the dying ages, dying times, like dying years, the craze for spices, they were putting more money in the wrong place. Because it was through the end of the Roman Empire that they discovered the routes from the Mediterranean, crossing the Nile and crossing the Suez Canal, like coming down south. Because before this, no one it all reached them, but they never came out. So they thought that they discovered the spice route by just coming to the west coast of Africa. They were happy. And Jeddah, that is Saudi Arabia, and Eden. So they thought they had reached the spice route. But still, no one had gone around the Cape of Good Hope or around the Indian Peninsula other than Indians and Arabs themselves, and Chinese. The Chinese also were doing it by portage or by camels on land till they decided that they want to give competition to the Arabs, and then they took the South China Sea, went all around the archipelago islands of Indonesia, Philippines, and then they came all the way to the other west coast of India, Coromandel. So there were two coasts of India which were always trading on spices. The west coast was the Coromandel coast, that is where Tamil Nadu is in south of India, and the Malabar coast where Kerala is on the west of India. So we had west and east of India. So India actually was the transition, was the trade port where things were like the import-export junction. Things came in, were exported. And also,
And the overland Silk Road.
yeah, yeah,
Afghanistan
yeah,
to-
yeah. And in different times in history, like when Alexander came all the way to Punjab in India and fought the kings over there. Before that, the same king had sent his emissary to all the way to the Roman courts, saying that I can offer you all this goodies from Asia. But when Alexander came to his doorstep, he didn't like it. But so the trade was that I will send it to you at my price, but if you come to my door to loot it, you're not having it. So that kind of, and that's where Alexander was finally defeated. And that's one war he was defeated, and then he moved on to Central Asia, where he fought the Mongols, more defeat, and that's what, and he died also over there. So there were many routes, like I can say before Christ and before Moses, the routes were land, not so much long routes, but between like what is Afghanistan, like if the spices had to come from by sea from Indonesian and Malay islands, the Sumatra and the Brunei and all these places, they came to the Coromandel coast, Tamil Nadu, which is at the tip of India. Then they were taken to another very prominent trading port in India, Gujarat. It played a very, very big role because Gujarat was very close at the foremost jutting tip of India into the Arabian Sea. And there, from there, it was easy to go to the west coast of Africa and to the south of Saudi Arabia, the Arab, Yemen and whatever, you know. And also, that's where the Egyptians also traded. So sea trade was more common in ancient times than the land trade. The land trade happened later when the Chinese got involved with the silk and the porcelain and other things, and then the frankincense and things that were Arab, the wheat, had to come to China. So with spices alone was not being traded. There was a lot of things traded. Slaves were being traded also. So I heard that there were, like the history says, there's a lot of slave trade and a lot of juvenile children, women, girls, everything was traded. So spice trade, and with spice trade, everything else also was traded. Yeah, sure. So these are the routes. And there was one route which was all the way up to Syria. So from the Syria, it went into Mesopotamia. From Mesopotamia and then into today's Turkey, Constantinople. So that was another route. And every 100 years, the routes changed depending on the empires, the rulers, and who had what kind of treaty with whom, and who wanted to kind of sponsor these caravans or these voyages to go and get these spices and the other goods. So it depended a lot on that, who was ruling when. Then religion also, because the Crusades happened. At that time, the Muslim world just cut off from them. So at the time of Crusades, again, they wanted to use the Suez Canal because they could not do the land. Syria and the Crusades, the Crusaders had their thing going, so it didn't have to work. So every time in history, there was a different route taken. So there were, in all, I think there were like 4 or 6 routes which were used through all these centuries to trade in spices. And finally, when Vasco da Gama decided after, before him, there was another seafarer from Portuguese person from Portugal called Dias. He actually did go around the African continent and went back. But there was so much money spent on Columbus, they said, we don't want to take another route again, because by that time Columbus had gone 2 times to the Caribbean islands and back. And sometimes I'm laughing because when I was a little girl in grade 4, Columbus was a hero, and today he was really put on that pedestal for discovering the new world, and we realized that he had hardly done anything. So it makes me laugh, you know, it really makes me laugh, yeah. So same like, you know, we were monkeys or whatever, you know, and Darwin's theory, oh Lord. So we were not. I'm sorry, but I'm a believer, so, you know, I would say that no, we were created by some supernatural power. What all said and done, I don't think we just happened by anything banging into anything. So yeah, so it's like really funny that to see that. And then he said, no, we are enough. We are not spending any more on any of these voyages. And then finally, after 10 years, Vasco da Gama leaves for the voyage to come to the India. And he does go around the Cape of Good Hope, around south of Africa, and reaches first the west of Africa, then from there the south tip of Arabia, and then India finally. And he reaches Cochin, not Goa. Even I was thinking he reaches Goa first. No, he reaches Cochin. And where he is greeted by a strong Arab community who are living as part of that country. It says that there were tens and thousands of Arabs already living as part of those places like China, India, Indonesia. They were well settled. And I know that for real because when I, in 91 or 92, I went to work in Dubai, and every second person in Dubai, a girl, had the name Hind. Hind, H-I-N-D, Hind. And I know, because I'm Arabic speaking, not Arabic speaking, but I know Arabic, I know Urdu, I know Persian, because I'm from a Muslim family, so I have a little more access to the history and languages which are related to the Arab world and the Persian world. I said, why do you name your daughters Hind? Hind is my country, India. That's the name for Hind in Arabic and Persian. They said, yeah, of course, Hind, beautiful, everything comes from Hind. You know, whether it's our pearls, whether it's our jewelry, whether it's our spices. So everything good came from India. So if you wanted to give the most beautiful name and give the most magnificently glorious name, it had to be Hind. It had to be India. And that's what the Greek empires and the Roman empires call the land of golden birds. That was India. So I know I'm going to share this with you, but at one time, reading through the books, I had tears in my eyes. Because I'm from India, and I said, oh my God, what a beautiful place I belong to, you know, and my ancestors. And we've been part of this world history forever, forever and forever. There are dynasties like the Chola, the Maurya, and Buddha. You know, he was a king. And everyone, and we are so connected, and we were like the stepping stone for everyone to see beyond. They came and they saw beyond, you know, and they discovered, and they lived, and they learned to live. And there's so much that my country is given. And I was like, oh my Lord, really? So it makes me, you know, I had a tear to see what today stands of my country, but that's it. That's the way the world is. And we are, again, I see a lot of that in this transition, especially in Toronto today, in Canada, in many parts of the world, like the UK, Europe. If you go to any European city today, or you had to travel into 1970s in a European city, and you travel today, you won't see so much of Caucasian. You will see so much of mix. So we are, again, coming to a new world where we are all going to be one, I think, through our cultures, through our food habits, through how we dress, through how we speak, and this wonderful thing of the Syrian kitchen here. So it's amazing, you know, and I just hope we all, as commonplace for us, as common man or the person who walks the street, this should be our goal, to embrace, to be bringing this oneness in. Because I read also in history that they had, at a time, 1,800 kilograms of ivory coming to the Greek empires. And what did they do with the ivory? The rich senators made table legs with that ivory. So like crazy. So, you know, so exploitation and greed is from the day one, I think, we walk this planet. So it's up to us, you know, to basically get out of that and see and embrace and respect everyone, and just, it's beautiful. And to think of that a spice talk can bring up this subject. It's beautiful.
Can you pick up where she was talking about the arrival of the Portuguese at Goa, right? And so, you know, this is coming within 30 to 50 years of Columbus's expeditions to the New World. So in that arrival in Goa, they have on the board chili seeds.
Yes, of course.
So this idea of like chili peppers and spice, you know, we're talking about spices, and chili pepper being sort of probably one of the more famous spices when people think of something that is spicy, and Indian food having this reputation as being very spicy. Well,
Pungent, yeah.
the use of chili pepper in India and Asia is all post Christopher
16th,
Columbus.
post 16th century.
So although much of the history of the spice trade was coming from Asia
East to west,
into
yeah.
Europe, at least from the Eurocentric perspective, none of these things were from there. Everything was coming in, being imported, brought in
Yes.
through traders. With the beginning of this colonial expansion, you also started to see a reversal. So
Reverse. It was potatoes, tomatoes, and chilies. Like tobacco, yeah. And these were the coffee. No, coffee was also in Africa, but they were essentially coffee and cocoa beans. First was found in South America and then recognized. And then we think that something is indigenous to some place, but they were all traded and naturalized. Many centuries before many voyages even took place in different places on this planet. That also happened.
So now, you have this thing in the other direction where you would go and you would have like an absolutely authentic Indian dish of potatoes and chilies, and whereas none of those, those ingredients are actually Indian. So there was this kind of, with the beginning of colonial expansion and transformation, also a shift in the direction that these things were moving.
True.
Now that you have chilies in Sichuan cuisine or throughout India, where Thai food is all post-colonial, post-New World.
Yeah, post-New World. Yeah, that's another one interesting fact which I just didn't want to believe for many years. I said, no, can't happen. Chilies is ours. Because I have walked the chili fields in Rajasthan. They are fiery red, they are beautiful, and the Rajasthani women dressed in the orange, yellow, collecting these red chilies, and it's beautiful. And then the Maharajas and the Nawabs of India sent their own emissaries and their own discoveries to South America to get different. I didn't know that. They got so interested in the variety of chilies, the seeds which came with Vasco da Gama and the other Portuguese later on. After that they came, they were not satisfied with that one or two varieties that were there. They sent people to South America to bring more varieties, to find out more what is there in the form of chilies. And that's why we have so many different varieties growing in India. Chilies. And then tea again, even tea. Chai is ours, chai. We can't think of a morning without chai. Then one day when you are 22, you realize, no, chai is not yours. Okay, chai grew in China and was brought to us only after the British East India Company, and was planted in Assam, the northeast region of India. But it's so staple for us, chai. So we can't think of a life without chai, but chai came from there.
Well, I mean, and so those were the part of the things. The British got very into tea and coffee at one point, and then that trade was being pretty hardly controlled by the Chinese, and so they started getting in conflict with China over the tea trade, and there was opium and box rebellion and other things going on there. So part of what they did is they started to exploit their own colonial things to grow and the things that way they didn't have to go through trade to get it. They could kind of pull it out of their own colonies. And same Dutch East Indies and French Indochina and like a lot. And
the French were the late entries.
But all of those things were spices
and the sad thing is that they've
represented a big part of the economics of colonialization.
Colonization, and they fought all their wars on foreign land. That's the sad part. So the Dutch East India Company were fighting with the British East India Company on my land. Yeah, so it's, there's so much of this politics also at that time, which was had its effect on the people of that land also, while some flourished and some saw the end of a race. Yeah.
These are basically private companies with their own armies
that
would go to war.
Yes.
We're talking about a hostile takeover, right?
So imagine.
These were not necessarily nation states fighting political wars. These were sort of agent corporate and business entities empowered to fight wars over trade routes and other things
Yes,
as well.
true, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's it. How do you think? What more? Anything else? I think especially the chilies, and to embrace the chilies through all of Southeast Asia. The reason I then went on to ask the historians and the elders in my hometown Bombay that how come we embraced this? If pepper was heat enough and clove is heat enough, because these two are pungent. Among all the spices, pepper, clove are pungent next to chilies. So they said it's because the chilies, when you eat them, one, they are high in vitamin C. And when you eat them, you perspire. So in warmer climates, it actually makes you feel from inside, because you perspire and it does some kind of chemical, you feel cooler. That's the reason chilies were so easily brought into the main cuisine of these countries.
Also,
Yeah.
plants were very resilient, and the chili dried extremely well.
Yeah, the seeds dried very well.
Very well and kept for a long time.
Yeah.
Whereas other things like cloves and pepper basically were almost impossible.
No, they
to
were
reproduce
impossible.
in other
Even
climates.
today,
So there
even
were
today.
certain plants that were able to be
Like the potatoes, tomatoes,
utilized
yeah.
in different places. So like, rubber was able to be transplanted from South America into Indonesia. There were
Yes.
other plants like bananas and things were able to find
Yep.
things, but some
Yes.
today
Yeah.
cloves are still almost entirely
Cloves are indigenous today. Nutmeg and maize cannot grow anywhere else but the Indonesian islands.
they have in the Caribbean.
No, yeah, but the indigenous, they have in the Caribbeans now, okay. But cloves and green cardamom. Green cardamom is one of the queen of spices after saffron. Saffron is the most expensive spice, then is green cardamom. And green cardamom still grow in a particular place in Kerala only. So they are very indigenous, and to know of it that they were naturalized in Kerala, but green cardamom came from Iran at one time. So yeah, but they are naturalized. Then they grow. The biggest exporter after Iran is India, and so they grow in Iran. I don't know whether it's still because of the embargoes in the system, but mainly it's India who supplies the green cardamom. Saffron again came from the Persia, then to Kashmir, then was not seen in Persia for 100 years, then went back from Kashmir to Persia. When the Persian came with Mongols and invaded India and started having their sultanates in India, and they ruled India.
Just,
So,
how familiar are people with saffron? I mean, people have all tasted it in something or another. Are you aware that it's for more or less the most expensive spice in the world? Are people familiar with what it is and how it's cultivated, what makes it so expensive? Because it's kind of interesting.
You know what actually saffron strands are? Okay, what are they?
It's from a flower.
Yeah, but yeah,
Crocus or
they,
Tiny little
they are the stigmas.
yeah.
They are the stigmas of the flower.
So they're hand-picked out of the
They're
center of
hand-picked,
each
yeah.
flower when it blooms.
Yeah.
It takes something like 100,000 flowers to produce a
Yeah.
kilo of saffron. And they're all, each one being handpicked.
And the thing is, Len, that they only bloom for a very short time. I've seen it in Kashmir for a very short time, just in spring for a little time. That's it. After winter immediately, and then they're gone. And then all those fields are like barren. They don't even have a little green thing going. They just, the green plant, it's a small shrub. It comes, grows out of the ground for that time in winter, flowers just before spring, and that's it. And the beautiful, nice purple violet flowers with these orange stigmas. And that's pretty. Cloves, again, are part of a flower. So you have categories of spices, which the seed spices, are your coriander seeds, cumin seeds, fenugreek seeds. All these seed spices, when we sow, we'll get an herb. They all grow into a small plant and all have their own greens. But while the fruit and the tree spices like your cinnamon, cloves, your nutmeg, maize, these are parts of fruits, parts of a tree. Like the clove is again part of a flower. It's a stigma again of a flower, which is the fruit and then the flower. So like your cashew nut, the cashews grow outside. The cashew is a nut, but then the cashew grows outside its fruit.
The mace and the nutmeg are two different
of the same fruit. Yeah.
So the mace is like the red arrows, they call it,
That grows
around the
nut, and then it has a
inside
fruit.
the nut is the nutmeg.
And then fruit is like a quincy. It's a tart fruit. It is a fruit like quincy, and then you have the fruit. Then when you break it in, you see the fine web of the maize around the nut, and then is the nutmeg inside. That's really the nut of the fruit. Chilies are fruits. Chilies, tomatoes are fruits. So that's why and there is no two colors that chili grows in. Every chili grows green. So I always have this question. So there are two varieties of chili. There's one green, one red. No, there are many varieties of chili in different shape for their pungency and everything. But every chili on its plant is green, from green to yellow, yellow to orange, orange to red. And then further to retain the red, it's all sun-dried. So there is no green chili which stays green chili forever, and there's no red chili which ripens as a red chili. No, they all start green. Green to yellow, yellow to orange, and
Like in Mexico, which has a big chili culture, the same chili picked at different times or processed in
Yes.
different ways can have different names and they're used in different recipes.
Right.
So it can get confusing because you're like, oh, I thought that was a
Yeah.
rancho,
No,
it was a
no,
chipotle.
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
it was, no, it's actually the exact same plant, but one's picked when it's green, one's picked when it's red, one's dried, one's smoked, and some's cooked.
And that's what happened once in the Mughal courts, and the Mughals didn't wanted to. They was very, very fond of fine things, everything fine. So their culinary also had to have finesse in it, and had to have a lot of flavors in it, and had to be reinvented every day in the kitchen, the Mughals. So they decided that we don't want to use pepper, don't want to use red chili. We want something which is a faint color, which is more close to our Persian sauces, or which are more light color. So that's how I didn't even know. Many years later, around I was nearly 30 when I discovered there's a yellow chili in India. And it's plucked just when it's yellow and then dried, and you only find it in the winter months. You can only do it in the winter months in India, and only the north of India has it. Delhi and Lucknow and the places where essentially the Mughal Nawabs and all were there. And that's such a fine, it's like one of the fine things used in that particular dishes. And it's not that pungent, and it's got a beautiful aroma, and they call it the yellow chili. So yeah, so and that's how then the yellow chili came about. So after green, not leaving it to ripen and to turn red, the yellow chilies were plucked. So yeah, that's how it happens, I guess.
There's yellow and orange chilies that are also popular.
Okay.
In American video and stuff, and they tend to pick them at that color and then pickle them at
Okay.
that particular and keep them that color. I'll just add that if you're interested in the topics and stuff, you'd like to get a little more hands-on on some of this stuff, Abeda will be doing a workshop here on October 17th, an introduction to Indian spices. So she'll go a little bit more in depth into some of the more commonly used spices like cardamom and cumin and some of the seed spices. There.
Seed spices I'm doing, yeah.
Introducing some less common ones like ajwain seed or fenugreek, right? And she'll be you'll be hands-on, you'll be creating 3 different recipes, right? And those recipes will use the different spices and sort of talk to the different health benefits attributed to each spices. And you'll be able to make a custom
Yeah, that's the nice thing, right?
to take home.
Because everyone, when you talk about spices, like my friend Gabby, so she said, oh, it's hot. So there's again this myth around heat and spices. So I always correct people. They say, oh, the food is spicy. I said, no, it's hot. Because spices cannot give heat to the food. To give heat to the food, the dish has to have some sort of chili, pepper, and then cloves. Cloves are pungent. They give really good heat. So if it's any other spice, whether it's your cinnamon or whether it's your nutmeg or whether it's your green cardamom, black cardamom, they all have beautiful aroma and lovely flavors, but no heat. So spicy and heat are 2 different things. And that's what that's my mission, that people come to recognize that and stop saying spicy food and curry food. And again, curry, I say curry is not Indian. Curry is not Indian, because I can never understand, it's popularized in England. So curry is an English dish. Curry is an English word. It has nothing to do with India because you can walk the streets of India, north, south, east, west, looking for curry. No one will be able to serve it. Now, in the last 20 years, they've come to know, okay, chicken tikka masala is supposed to be our food. And if we are in a 4-star restaurant in a 4-star hotel, so it has to be on our menu because we will have visitors. So that's how chicken tikka masala came to be on our menus. So till I left India, I had never heard of chicken tikka masala.
And China is not too familiar with General Tso either, so.
Yeah. So, and the story on the curry is that Madhur Jaffrey, she's one of the, I think, the authority when it comes for the North America to write and bring in and educate through her books about the culinary of India. She's done the best. I think she takes the authority on that, Madhur Jaffrey. And in her book, it was really funny that she says that how did this curry powder come about to be? So saying the British were leaving, everything gone, done, but the last boat or ship leaving, and one of the officers, from the British Army or Navy, he comes running back to the coast and says, no, I have forgotten something and I have to go back. I have to go back home. So back home, this is the house he still has in Madras somewhere. So he goes back and he goes running to his Khanzama. Khanzama is the one who's in charge of the kitchens. That person called the Khanzama. He says, I'm leaving, but I'll miss you. He's saying, yeah, you'll miss me. No, I'll miss your food. I'll miss your food. I need something to take with me. So I need your food. She says, what can I do for you? How will I? No, you put it, package it, give it to me something. So there goes the curry powder. So the Khanzama said, okay, you like it, take some of this, take some of this, and here you go. Now do what you can do with it. And that's how probably the curry powder came about. And the word in England, it's always Madras curry powder. So she put a story like that, and I think maybe it came about like that, I don't know. So because curry powder essentially is lots of turmeric, fenugreek. No one knows it has fenugreek. People think it's only cardamom and cumin, but it's lots of fenugreek powder, turmeric powder, and coriander powder. So that's your curry powder. And that's why, so when it comes to spices, there should be no, taking 10 steps away from spices, but I think you should embrace them. Especially, they are so creative you can get with spices. Everything which you are, whether you're on a diet, whether you have a special diet, whether you're vegan, whether you're non-vegetarian, any food you want to cook, spices can. Like, for me, it's like what would bring us to the table was just the aroma from the kitchen. Just the aroma from the kitchen.
Also, one thing too, like, if anyone has like a pepper mill and you crack like fresh black pepper on your dish, right? Or you get those like little paper packets, that like
Oh Lord, yeah.
pencil shavings in them, and you put that on your, and it's like there's a big difference.
Big difference.
Between the pepper that comes out of your freshly ground pepper and I mean, so when people go and buy these little things of like already ground pepper that have been sitting on a supermarket for a year, I'm not entirely sure why they're doing it at all, because there isn't a whole lot of flavor left in that. But I'll add that it's like that for almost all the spices.
All the spices.
Right? So,
all the spices.
Those flavors, when you get that cumin powder that's been in your pantry since the early 80s, or like, these things, it's all good, it's there. But to get the fresh cumin and then to toast it in a pan and then to crush
That's
it.
the way to do it.
Or mortar and pestle, or to do that with coriander seed.
Yep.
The difference between what you get, the aromas and flavors you get from your spices, are as different as they are between that pepper dust
yes, true.
and real cracked pepper. So the spice class and stuff.
The spice class, you learn a lot like this, yeah.
What those flavors can really be, how much more they can be than just little
Yeah,
tin or
adding to this, when I've done this coaching in spices and cookery classes for a good 10 years in Dubai. And that place has food of the world just there, because it was unbelievable. I didn't miss anything when it came to vegetables and fruits and spices, because again, that was always, they knew spices better than us Indians sometimes, because they were on the trade route. For them, it was not alien. So they were always cooking with spices. They were trading with spices. They knew the attributes of spices. They used it to the best in their pharmacy. The best pharmacist and everything, all the medicine and everything from the Arab world, which went to the Renaissance period to Europe.
So
Yes.
of the most of the world, because of their strength, because of their strong, powerful flavors, because they were rare and exotic, right? They were attributed with all kinds of, imbued with some legitimate medicinal properties and a lot of kind of implied medicinal things because of their rarity and pungency. So,
I would say mostly medicinal properties, because there's a big study of the Unani medicine. Unani medicine is a combination of Greek and Arab medicine, then the Ayurveda. And definitely, and that's what alternative medicine is all about today. And even when you think of all your allopathy medicines and the drugs that they make today, somewhere the roots start is a chemical composition of some spice or some herb that is then duplicated today in the chemical world, I'm thinking.
well,
Right,
there's
yeah.
certainly a lot of biological
Yeah.
foundations in
Yeah.
medicine, but before we had the modern medicine and the modern chemistry, these powerful smelling, these powerful
Yes.
tasting, these pungent and spicy things were imbued as being the most powerful things that one could ingest. And you know, whether you coordinated around your metaphysics or your astrology, or whether you had it, all of the cultures recognized that these were essential parts of medicine. And I mean that, you know, when you had epidemics like the Black Plague and
Yes.
so forth, you know, big poultices of powerful herbs like cloves and
Yes.
were thought to be so strong as to clean the air
Right.
and disinfect before there was germ.
And frankincense
And, you know,
was, a lot of
those
frankincense
things
was
were
burnt, yeah.
Also considered to ward off disease and have other properties as well. So the history of spices is also very caught up in the history of medicine.
Medicine,
until
yes.
the contemporary time, and now there's a sort of a bit of a renaissance, a rediscovery
No.
of the original sort of ideas around the medical properties of herbs, and a re-examination that's ongoing to which of those things can actually be leveraged in contemporary diet and stuff towards health.
I experienced this with my kids. Like my firstborn, being a new mother, I was totally dependent on the doctor, and the story of antibiotics started. And I didn't understand. He would never get better, even after all the antibiotics. And then when I had my second child, I said no. And then I went back to my mother-in-law and I said, I want to find out how else can I help my kids when they fall with any common ailment. And she gave me a little book, which was in a language from the state I come from, Maharashtra. And I said, okay, she thinks it's Marathi. I said, okay, I'll read it, I'll find out. And my second child, I didn't give her any allopathy medicine. I had a little stone, and I had all these little, like, you know, you have those tea bag wooden boxes. So I had all my spices and different herbs in that. And anything happened, I would refer to the book. And on this little stone, rub everything, and take it on the little spoon and give her a taste of it. And she would get better. Except for when the fever reached 103, I would be outside a pediatrician's office. Never entered his office. He only knew me by face. And he said, why do you come here? I said, if in case something goes wrong, I'm here, but otherwise I'm treating her well. So it did work. So yeah, so this is it. Yeah, it works. And again, attached to everything, whether it's spices or whether you're eating something, is our mind. Our mind plays a very important role. So all the distraction you have while you're eating food is not good for you, because you have to be focused on your food. The digestion and absorption of whatever you're eating starts here in your mouth. So if and most of us now in this new world, my kids, like with a phone in their hand, and you know, when our parents say sit down, pay attention, have your meal. It's even, I think we should bring that all back, because that's the more reason that everyone thinks I'm eating well, but why I'm not healthy. Because when you're eating, if you are distracted and you're thinking, you're worrying, or whatever, and mostly we are stressing and worrying. I hardly see us happy. Mostly we're always stressing and worrying about something or the other. And that's what the body at that time your mind can either concentrate on absorbing your nutrients or produce chemicals to relax you. It can't do two things together, I think. So that's another thing that you should be, you know, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's 8 o'clock, so, you know, we usually try to run the talk between sort of 7 and 8, but I think Abeda's going to be hanging out here
Yeah,
to chat.
I'm here.
Have a bite to eat, and I'll invite you to come, and if you want to try the delicious speculoos ice cream, it's served with 2 of the Dutch spice cookies, so a lot of the spices that we're talking about, and a lot of the history of the spice route, the trading, and the kind of, you know, in every bite you have a 1,000-year journey across around the world and back again. So invite yourselves, only $5 for that wonderful trip. So
Yeah.
and, I just want to thank Abeda very, very much.
Thank you
for
so
coming out and
much.
sharing all her knowledge. We'd also like to thank all of you
Thank you.
for coming and being a part of it, and invite you to take a look at Abeda's upcoming workshop. She'll also be doing a Diwali dinner.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. I'm going to light up your place with little lamps. I hope you're happy about that.
So,
Yeah.
So if you're interested in the things that are happening here at the Debonair, we do send out our email newsletter every Monday. You can add your name to our mailing list. We also update our website and our Facebook every week with announcements of all the new upcoming events. And so I invite you to stay in touch.
Yeah, and
I look forward to seeing you all around the table sometime very soon. Thank you all so much for coming out.
And before we go, I just want to say that, like Len said, that about the pepper and thing. I really encourage you to buy whole spices. It's simple, just because you're investing so much. And I see that every time with spice racks and spices, they're highly priced because in our minds, we already perceive that if I have to buy the best spices, I have to shell out a lot of money. Yeah. So when you go and buy any spices which are packed, think of the logistics, think of the factories where they are processed. So why not just go for the whole spices? Every spice is available in its whole form also, whether it's nutmeg powder or whether it's cardamom seeds, or whether it's
no frills. You can buy the little McCormick's thing of black pepper. It's $10 for
Yeah.
like about 80 grams.
Yeah.
And then like a couple of shelves
Sure,
over, there's
yeah.
a big bag of Suraj, which is like the Indian
Suraj,
version
yeah.
of things. It's like $2.99 for like 250 grams of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it's
that's
like,
what.
whether
You have to
it's
just look.
packaged in this kind of like familiar spice bottle, or it's in these sort of ethnic food section, right? Getting comfortable and familiar with spices is also going to, save you a lot of money and probably give you
And
friends.
it is another, the problem is that I tried all these highly packed, fancy packing spices and all those things, but they are so many times adulterated. Sadly, they are taking the money from you, but the product also is not good. So so it's very good to have your coriander seeds, cumin seeds, dry roast them, just a mortar and pestle. And another very nice option is a coffee grinder, a small $30, $40 coffee grinder at your kitchen counter. Anytime, whatever spice, just put it in there and just give it a little whiz, and you're done. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah.
How long, what's the shelf life of a spice?
Whole spices, shelf life is longer. It can go, it depends on how you're putting it. I would say opaque glass bottles are best to store spices. I'm not a big fan of plastic, but or you can do opaque plastic bottles, but opaque glass bottles. I'm saying opaque because remember, when the potency of spices falls once they are exposed to light and air because of oxidization, like anything else. So the potency goes down, so the strength goes down. And another thing is that if you are buying spices which are expensive, like your green cardamom, your saffron, and your cloves and nutmeg, you can again put it in your fridge. It stays forever. The fridge is a great place to keep these spices, but not good for seed spices, because seed spices kind of have, their essential oils are not so powerful, so they kind of gather moisture. So your seed spices are your cumin, caraway, coriander seeds. They are not so great in the fridge for long, but a short time. But the fruit and tree and bark spices, they stay longer. So yeah, so buy whole spices.
One of the things that gave spices their value was their ability to survive a really
Yes,
long time. I mean,
true.
If we think about this spice route that we were talking about, the overland route from China to Europe, the
Oh my
sea
God.
route from, by sail from the Spice Islands in the South Pacific through the Arabian merchants and into
I must tell you
this
this.
could have taken 1 or 2 years. I mean, they're not
A whole year. Because what they would do is the monsoon winds, when India was going to approach monsoons, that's the time when the Arabs would sail. Because the monsoon winds would bring them sooner to the Indian peninsula.
So the trade winds for that reason.
Yeah.
So of all you don't have like fruits or meat or cheese.
Yeah.
These things don't last.
No.
Along one of the characteristics of spice, for example, compared to herbs, is specifically
Yes.
that they dry and are they actually maintain their value and their potency and their flavor for over storage and transport, which is what made them
And
international
one of the
commodities
other
as well.
it's not essentially a spice category, but camphor was again for this reason was very popular in the Egyptian times and everything. Yeah, so camphor and camphor only was found in Indonesia, but the other resins like the Arabic gum, the frankincense, the myrrh, and all they found in the Arab world. South Arab. So it's, yeah, and the monsoon winds, I'm saying they came there in monsoons, so around June, July, and they left in Feb. So after the winters, when the winds, then the days were shorter and the winds something, so that's what they left at that time. So they spent nearly a year just sitting there in India, and then they went back. So definitely it was the whole journey was a year and a half, probably. And the spices definitely lasted all that, yeah, and straight fresh. So yeah, it's beautiful to know, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A lot of coffee, so coffee or tea is included in your meal. And so thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed, and I wish you you have my little information there, which is my Twitter handle and my Facebook page. And I don't have a website yet because I had my website in Dubai, but I'm going to have one here. But I'm not great with social media, but still, I do post everything. You can follow me, and you'll get to know of all my upcoming events, all my upcoming workshops on my Facebook page and my Twitter handle. And I would love to, for you, as my guest today, I would be happy and honored if you put your comments and your views on my Facebook page. That will go a long way for me. Thank you so much.
You hear that?
Yeah, I'm going to have the ice cream too. Yeah.
So,
So,
Ryan knows,
yeah, yeah.